Hi, and welcome to my review of the iPad Pro with the M4 processor. This is not going to be a full review, but just a first impressions video. I used it for about a day, and yeah, I just wanted to tell you some of the things that I noticed. But before we get into that, let's start with a classic unboxing. 11-inch M4 Wi-Fi cellular. And to unbox it, like usual, you just pull these two tabs. And here it goes. Let's open the wrap here. And there it is. iPad Pro, 11-inch. Camera now on the landscape side. Let's see what else comes in the box. We get a bunch of documentation. And new for this year's iPad, we actually do not get Apple stickers anymore. None of them are included here. Apple says it's due to environmental reasons. We also get a single USB-C to USB-C cable. This seems to be exactly the same one that comes with the iPhone 15 Pro. Nice braided, but relatively short. Let's move on to the Magic Keyboard. Here it is. Very similar experience. We again get two pull tabs. And then we just open the lid. It's packaged almost exactly the same way as the iPad itself, in a little paper. Let's open that up as well. And here we go. That's it. Nothing else included. No documentation or anything. It's literally just the keyboard. So that's that. Let's open it up. Comes with another paper. Oh, never mind. There is some documentation. Here it is, inside the Magic Keyboard actually. And we can open this up, but I think it's just a little bit of paper. Nothing spectacular in here. Yeah, just documentation. And with that, let's put the iPad in the Magic Keyboard and turn it on, I'd say. Here we go. Apple logo and booting up. First impressions. The keyboard with the silver aluminum here feels really nice. We still have the same material on the outside that Apple used for the last Magic Keyboard. Same as the bottom of the Magic Keyboard actually. So only the top of the palm rest is silver or is aluminum. The hinge feels actually a little bit sturdier than the old one as first impressions. It now opens to exactly 90 degrees if you don't fold the second hinge, let's say. And it gets a function roll. And what I'm just seeing here, what's pretty cool, is there is a little plastic silicone lip around the keyboard, which probably protects the iPad screen from the aluminum so it doesn't get scratched up. That is great. And also, from what I can feel, it seems to be a little bit more flush with the keyboard than the last iPad was with the Magic Keyboard. I picked this iPad up from the Apple Store first thing in the morning and I've been using it the whole day. Just for context, I upgraded from the 2020 iPad Pro with the A12Z chip. I upgraded because, well, mainly the battery is pretty dead after 4 years. I used it very extensively every single day. And also the 6 GB of RAM are not really enough anymore. And when I use Stage Manager and multiple apps, they keep crashing on me. So I thought it was time for an upgrade. In fact, I already wanted to upgrade the last 2 years with the M1 and M2 iPad. But I didn't do it in any of those years because the 11-inch got stuck with the LED panel and didn't get the mini LED screen. And I really wanted the new screen. So this year, both iPads, the 11 and the 13-inch, got the OLED screen and it was time for me to pull the trigger. First thing I noticed after unboxing it is that it's obviously a bit thinner. So compared to the older iPads, the M1, M2, but also the A12Z, it's quite a bit thinner. It's also thinner with the Magic Keyboard because, well, the Magic Keyboard is a little bit thinner by itself. So the whole combination does make a little bit of a difference. What I thought was really impressive when I checked out the thickness and compared it to some other devices is that if you put it next to a MacBook Pro, the whole iPad Pro is just a little bit thicker than the MacBook Air's screen. So if you think about it, a more powerful screen is in this iPad Pro and a more powerful computer than this MacBook Pro. And it still fits in just a tiny bit more thickness than just the display of the MacBook Pro. What I have to say though is that if you put it side by side with the A12Z iPad Pro, the difference in thickness is not as drastic as people have made it seem, in my opinion. It is still noticeable, but it's not night and day at all. This also applies to the weight of the devices. I weighed both of them in the Magic Keyboard and the difference came down to only 41 grams. So that is not a huge difference. And I think if you handle them day by day, you're not gonna really be able to tell the difference. I mean, maybe if you hold them side by side, you could maybe tell, but it's really not a big difference at all. Next thing I did was to check out the display. And obviously the OLED is really great in this. The blacks are super deep and the picture is super bright. But I have to say that in daylight, again, the difference wasn't shocking compared to the older iPads. However, I put them side by side, this iPad, the A12Z one, and also my MacBook Pro with the mini LED screen. And I took a white picture and calibrated it with a color card. So the white balance is exactly matched to the color card. And then I checked the offset of the screens, the one on the new iPad Pro, the old iPad Pro, and the MacBook. All of them shift a tiny bit blue, but not crazy, just a little bit. However, the iPad Pro M4 was by far the most accurate. And you can also see this just looking at it with your bare eyes, that they are a little bit shifted towards the blue, a little bit more than the M4 iPad Pro. You can also tell that the M4 iPad Pro screen is quite a bit brighter than the other two devices. If you look at this image, for example, you can see that the clouds are quite a bit brighter on the M4 iPad Pro than on the other two devices. And this is also very visible to the naked eye. So I thought this was really cool to see, and obviously the new iPad Pro with its OLED screen can do this while still keeping the black at complete darkness, complete pitch black, because each individual pixel is able to turn off completely. In daylight you will see this difference, but it will be even more dramatic if you go to a dark room and you compare the A12Z iPad Pro with the LED screen and the new OLED screen, because the black will be just basically gray with the older iPads, but it will be completely black with the newer ones. Also, compared to the mini LED, it still has upsides because the mini LED screens are a little bit prone to blooming. Now, that said, the MacBook Pro's mini LED screen has a lot more dimming zones than the one on the old 13-inch iPad Pro. So actually the blooming is much less of an issue in the MacBook Pro. But if you compare the new iPad Pro to the last iPad Pro, the difference when it comes to blooming is obviously night and day because the new iPad Pro just doesn't have it. Next thing I wanted to note is that if you get the cellular version of the new iPad Pro, that it does not come with a SIM card slot anymore. So keep that in mind. You have to use eSIM now to be able to, well, get on the cellular network with your new iPad Pro. And another thing to note about the cellular capabilities is that there is no millimeter wave support anymore on the new iPad Pros. On the previous model, there was millimeter wave support in the US, but for example, in Europe, there was also no millimeter wave support on the old iPad Pro. So for Europe, there's no difference. For America, you're losing the millimeter wave capability, unfortunately. Another thing that's really cool is that now the camera is in the landscape orientation, which means that if you have the iPad in the Magic Keyboard and you have, for example, a video conference, you're going to look at it straight on and not off axis, as it was the case with the old iPad Pro that had the camera on the portrait side, so to speak. One thing I noticed while checking this out is that actually in the spot where the old FaceTime camera used to be on the previous iPads, there seems to be some sort of sensor on the new iPad Pro. And I wasn't able to find any information on what this is online, so if you know, please drop the answer down below in the comments. I also have a very similar question about the rear camera module. First of all though, we lost the ultrawide camera, which personally I find a bit strange because this means that the iPad Pro will not be able to shoot spatial video for the Vision Pro. And to be honest, I thought that all of Apple's new Pro devices would be able to do this. But then aside from that, if we check out the layout of the camera module, there are 5 elements here and 4 of them are obvious. It's the camera, the LiDAR sensor, the microphone, the new True Tone flash. But then there's a 5th element, slightly bigger than the camera, and I haven't found any information on what this is, and I haven't been able to determine it from Apple's spec sheet. So again, if you know what this is, please drop the answer down below in the comments. And then a couple more things I wanted to note about the camera. First of all, I'm a little bit surprised that it's not the 48 megapixel module of the iPhone 15 Pro or the iPhone 14 Pro for that matter. It's the same module. But I suppose it's because the module is too thick for the iPad of this size. I think it's a little bit of a shame that there's no 48 megapixel module in here, especially because Apple is really advertising this also as a video machine. Additionally, I quickly wanted to mention that this camera does not support Apple Log. So you can film in ProRes, but you cannot film in Apple Log. I thought it was pretty interesting and I don't really understand why this isn't possible, given that we can shoot ProRes. A quirk I noticed today while using it is that the volume buttons in landscape mode now seem to be inverted. So if you're pressing the right volume button, then the volume goes up in landscape mode and the left one lowers it in landscape mode. If you rotate the device in portrait mode, then up is up and down is down, as you would expect. On the old A12Z iPad Pro, what's interesting is that obviously in portrait mode it works the same way, but then if you rotate it to landscape mode, the left button raises the volume and the right button lowers the volume. I'm not sure what this is all about because both iPads are on the same iOS version. So I don't know, maybe this has something to do with the new hardware, I'm not sure. And speaking of the speakers, let's do a quick sound comparison of both of them. I have both of these devices at 50% volume now, and let's start with the A12Z iPad Pro. And now the new M4 iPad Pro. So now both iPads are at about 75% volume. Let's start again with the A12Z. And now the M4 one. And finally, both of them at full volume. First A12Z. And the M4 one. For me, it sounds subjectively as if the new iPad is a tiny bit louder and also has a little bit more bass, but it's not a dramatic difference. They sound extremely similar. When it comes to battery life, unfortunately, it's too early to tell. I'm gonna tell you in the full review what I think of the battery life, so stay tuned for that. Let's shift our focus to the Magic keyboards for a minute. To me, they feel very similar, but the one on the M4 iPad Pro, so the newer one, feels a little bit more clicky to me. But to be honest, that could also be because the old one is just 4 years old and maybe the keys are a little bit worn out. What is a big difference though is the trackpad. I feel like the new one on the M4 iPad Pro is a tiny bit higher. It's not a lot bigger, but a tiny bit bigger. And the Force Touch trackpad feels much better. This is what they sound like if you click on them. Another welcome addition is the function row, which honestly is super intuitive, and if you ever use the Mac or anything, you'll be right at home, and it takes about 2 seconds to adapt to it. So I think it's great and I'm happy that it's here. I was a little bit worried that the new aluminum surface of the new Magic keyboard may be more prone to scratching the iPad screen because it's a very hard surface and if dust or something gets in between, maybe it would scratch it. But as I already hinted at in the unboxing, there is now a little plastic rubber lip around the keyboard. So if you close the iPad, it actually doesn't lay on the aluminum surface and also doesn't lay on the keys. I think this is great because on the old Magic keyboard, the display would lay on the keys and sometimes oils and stuff from your fingers would get on the screen and make it really dirty. I think that should be a little bit better on the new one with this little lip around the keys. And another little quirk I noticed is that when you close the iPad Pro in the Magic keyboard, it actually doesn't sit flush, but there's a tiny little gap, especially towards the USB-C connector of the Magic keyboard, and it sort of closes completely towards the other side where the camera module is. So from this perspective, it's completely shut, but then if you look at it from this, you can see that there's a tiny little gap on this side. And finally, I thought it was pretty interesting that now the USB-C connector on the Magic keyboard actually rotates when you open the iPad Pro. I'm wondering if this may become a problem if you have like more thick or sort of stiffer cables that don't really like to be rotated or twisted. Before closing this first impressions video, I just want to mention that I did not get the new Apple Pencil Pro. I picked up the regular Apple Pencil Gen 2 when I was in the US last time and I got it on sale for a really good price. But I think since I don't really use the Apple Pencil for drawing, but I mainly just mark up documents and sign a document here and there, I'm gonna stick with the Logitech Crayon for a while. I still have this from back in the day and I got it for this iPad originally. It still has all the tilt functionality, the only thing it's missing is the pressure sensitivity and otherwise it works exactly like the Apple Pencil. So I can confirm that the Logitech Crayon works, and if you have one and you want to use it with the new M4 iPad Pro, then you can do that with peace of mind. Okay, so I think that's it for my M4 iPad Pro first impressions. I'm now gonna basically put my MacBook in a shelf for the next week or two, and anytime that I need it, I'm gonna take a piece of paper and note down what I needed it for, and other than that, everything I'm gonna do on this iPad Pro. So let's see how it turns out. And if you want to see the full review with a lot of battery testing, with cellular speed tests, charging speeds, all of that, and well, how the iPad served me after 2 weeks of exclusive use, then stay tuned. I invite you to subscribe to my channel. And yeah, I guess I'll see you in about 2 weeks.